This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share with you what to eat, how to move, and how to think in this second and better half, and might I add, during the middle of COVID-19. So this podcast is actually a topic that I did a video on recently. And I wanted to include nearly the same information in a slightly different discussion in the podcast because I know so many of you listen while you're commuting, while you're walking, while you're jogging, while you're strength training, and potentially now more than ever, you're looking for content. And I feel like this is so important that if you're not consuming it or didn't get it in another form, this is such a valuable way to either hear it for the first time or to reinforce what you may have heard before. And like reading a good book the second time through, pick up some more of the juicy details that will actually help you navigate this crazy time that we're in. So I record this really close to the day that I'm going to release it, as with many and most of the podcasts that I've released in these last 3 to 4 weeks now, because things are changing day to day. They're changing for you, they're changing for me, whether we're talking about you in the state that you're in, if you're here in the United States, or you in the world, and you in your home, in your household, dealing with maybe young adult children back at home, with young children home that you're now homeschooling, the whole gamut of working from home or having others in your household with a changed schedule that you weren't used to. All of it has changed things for each of us in slightly different ways. And it's changing day to day based on statistics and what else we can expect to happen. So I'm conscious of that. I'm trying to be cognizant of your needs and of meeting you where you are. So thus, the last minute, and you don't always get music in the beginning or the end of a podcast when that's the case. So the topic today, exercise, stress, and immunity during midlife, during the middle of COVID-19. So where I want to jump in is basically the inspiration for this entire piece of content, whether it's shown up for you in a post in text or in a video or here in the podcast first. There were too many comments very recently about making sure that you're getting moderate, regular exercise. And that can really get us into trouble if we don't have a good sense of understanding of what that is. So by moderate exercise, what we mean, what you should mean, is your sweet spot right in the middle. But by no means do you want to be exercising in a middle range zone. And I'll explain that a little bit more later. And if you are listening to the podcast, I have put the link to a video presentation into the podcast show notes. And that'll be at flipping50.com/exercise stress. No spaces in between, just exercise stress. That'll be it. So here's the problem with what I call zone training. And that is something that as a age group triathlon coach, as an age group triathlon athlete, as a strength and conditioning coach, zone training is something that I use with my clients of all kinds, those with medical exercise specialist kind of needs, and those who are literally athletes wanting to compete or begin competing, even with themselves in their second 50. Zone training actually uses heart rate training, or can, but doesn't have to. It actually uses the talk test. It uses your breath test, meaning right now, if you're listening and you're not exercising, you're probably breathing primarily through your nose, unless you have a cold or an allergy. And heaven forbid COVID-19. But if you are exercising hard, you are probably breathing more or a little more through your mouth, depending on the intensity level. So by zone training, we can label zone 1 for you would be entirely nose breathing. Zone 5 would be entirely mouth breathing. And if we included the talk test, zone 5 would be barely able to speak. Not even those between word breaths would be zone 5. Zone 1 is talking exactly how I'm talking, not breathless, speaking in many word sentences, stringing them all together, no cause for concern. But the harder you begin to work, the more, if you were running or walking or working out with somebody, the more you'd want to be asking questions and not answering them, because you just are breathless, focusing on getting as much oxygen as you can in. So that gives you an idea of zone training. So zone 1, if we were thinking in terms of a pyramid, the bottom of that triangle is zone 1. It's the heaviest. That's where you want to spend the majority of your time. It's your foundation. It's like your basement if you live in a northern climate. You've got to have one. That's what you build the rest of your house on. Zone 2, a little bit more intense. That's your endurance training zone. And so if you were going to go out, and let's say, not that this is a recommendation, but if you were going to exercise for 45 minutes or an hour, that would be your endurance training zone. And if you were fit enough, had a foundation enough that you didn't need to stop during that hour, we know completely that you would be in that zone 2, really working a little bit of mouth and nose breathing, not extremely hard, able to have a conversation, and pretty comfortable stopping and starting when you want to, according to the plan, not because you have to. When you get to working into interval training, you bring that into your workouts. You do high and low. So you're really working kind of in those high zones in 4 and or in zone 5. And then when you're recovering from those high intensity intervals, you're back down to zone 1. So it's very low, much lower than endurance. And it is those highs and lows and back and forth and push the gas and push the accelerator that actually causes more caloric burn or more energy expenditure during your exercise, and then more fat burning afterward in the payback from exercise that happens as your body repairs. That's an idea of zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, using all of them, what they feel like, what they look like, and how often. The one that's missing, I haven't talked about, is zone 3. Now, when somebody says exercise in moderation, you want to be careful, because I absolutely don't want my clients exercising in zone 3. Usually, that is somebody who's doing a zone 2 workout who has drifted. Their heart rate and the intensity level has drifted into zone 3 because your body's working harder because it's worked for a certain period of time, so you're getting more breathless and your endurance is maybe not up to the speed that you tried to go. And that's a place, zone 3, where you really get very few benefits. So the benefit to exercising correctly is that you get more hormonal balance overall, that you either decrease your cortisol level during and after, or you increase on purpose with a plan your cortisol levels during, and then because of it afterward, your cortisol levels are much more optimal, because that's the way cortisol and stress was meant to be placed on our body, not this chronic stress we have day in, day out, all the time. So if you allow yourself to creep into a point when you're on an endurance run or walk or bike ride where you actually have to stop and rest, but it wasn't supposed to be an interval training day, you've started out either too hard or you've gone too long for your fitness level. So it's key that you're working underneath that threshold so you can keep going. Okay, I want to move on. So you've got a little bit lower or a little bit better indication of what higher and lower zone training looks like. I want to dive into 3 things: stress in your immune system, stress in your endocrine or your hormone system, and stress in exercise. And throughout, I'll be deferring and referring to each of them. There's no way not to, but we're going to try to give you the emphasis of what it looks like if we're separating the 3. So first of all, stress in your immune system, because right now that is key and everybody's top priority. If you take care of your immune system, you're taking care of my immune system. If we are at all in contact with each other, and in some way, shape, or form, it's very possible that any of us are related to each other. So you take care of you, we take care of the world. All right, so your immune system, we don't know exactly the connection between exercise and boosting the immune system, but supposedly it's very related to increasing the circulation. So your cells, specific immune cells, the more they circulate throughout the body, the better off your body is going to be. So obviously, if we increase circulation, your respiration level, the blood flow through your body, we're going to increase those immunity-related cells traveling through your body. We know that too much exercise causes stress and depletes the immune system, and it's evident in overtraining among all populations. So if you think about any situation where your body is overloaded, that can be true. So if we take, for instance, an elite athlete, somebody who's very well conditioned, very used to challenging and difficult workouts and a lot of volume. If we put them in extreme cold, or we have them do workouts in the cold but not properly dressed, and just include their regular exercise, that suddenly will be overload, because they're not just doing the workout. Now their body is shivering and trying to keep them warm. There's so much going on that it's overload, it's overtraining. If we take athletes and we do the same thing, not in cold, but in extremely dry air and at altitude, similarly, there's an adaptation period that has to happen for athletes who train at altitude or compete at altitude. They, again, would be overloaded if we tried to do the same workout. Competitive stress. So you take an athlete who might actually even be tapering, starting to do less exercise as they approach their event, and you put them in a competitive place. Say somebody who's preparing for the Olympics, getting ready for a very important key competition. Even that can result in overload if they're doing regular or even less exercise. So, likening all of that back to stressful situations. The body is dealing with more stress than it's used to. This is a stressful time. COVID-19 is changing everybody's life. It's going to change everybody's business. It's going to change the world for the future. It's never going to be back to the way it was. And that can be very stressful because right now it's very uncertain. So you can be under overload if you continue to try to do the same workout that you were doing 4 and 5 weeks ago. Or you started exercise, which you should, because being sedentary and doing too little is equally a negative factor for your immune system as exercising too much. But if you don't have a progression that makes sense, you could still put yourself at risk for decreasing your immune system. Okay, stress and the endocrine system or your hormonal system. So the negative effects of cortisol for you, my friend, you, a woman in the middle of her life, in the middle of COVID-19, but for you in the middle of your life, this was happening for you anyway. 6 months, 3 months ago, it was going to happen, even if it's only just happened now. Negative effects of cortisol, our stress hormone, are amplified when you're going through major hormonal changes, as in perimenopause and menopause. Negative effects of stress have a negative effect on your blood sugar. Blood sugar levels will roller coaster, causing potentially cravings and mood swings and making it harder to choose the right foods that'll have a positive impact on blood sugar. Storage of fat and weight loss resistance are much more likely when that's the situation. So during the middle of your life, whereas at age 25, you had peaked in your muscle mass and it was easier for you to be at more optimal weight and optimal energy. At 55, potentially, you're a lot closer to being at your peak in fat storage. Not as easily losing weight, even if you're trying and efforting. The fat stored toxins. So let me explain that. Toxins that we've been exposed to in our life, whether it's BPA from plastic or can liners, whether it's makeup that we've used, before we knew better, before we knew to look for chemicals in protein powders and weren't even aware there was a difference in the quality of one versus another. So many things that can fall into this, but if we've been exposed and they've gotten into our body, those chemicals and toxins are somehow stored in your body, envelopes them, in a sense, in your fat, so that it can sequester it away from the rest of your body as a way to protect you. Once toxins are in your fat, though, it makes the fat harder to lose. So that increased and enhanced fat storage ability you didn't know you signed up for happens because of your negative effects of stress, because you're not handling it as well as you might have 5 or 10 years ago. And that will depress your immune system. Okay, the third piece is stress and exercise. So going into that a little bit deeper. First of all, inactive adults have a depressed immune system compared to active adults. Overtrained adults, however, also have a depressed immune system. You're looking for your sweet spot, the optimal level for you. With more activity, there's better circulation of those immune properties and cells, and your immune system is working better for you. With too much more activity or too much activity at a period of time when you're already dealing with stress, you also have a depleted immune system. So during times of stress, like right now, doing slightly less than you're used to for exercise enthusiasts for sure, and yet more than you were doing for the sedentary is key to your optimal immune system. So what is optimal for one person is not optimal for all people. You've got to take a good look at your own response. Are you getting a better night's sleep? Maybe not longer, but higher quality, feeling more rested when you wake up. Are you digesting better? Are you eliminating regularly? More so, less so? What's the status? Are you responding to people? You're more resilient to stress. You have a more positive outlook. All of those things are related and more related to you finding that sweet spot for exercise. There are two parts of the Flipping 50 creed, if you will, the after 50 fitness formula for women. Part of those creeds, 10 of them, are 1 and 2. Number 1, restore before more, meaning although yes, if you're sedentary, you should begin to exercise somehow. But before you try doing just more exercise, more volume, more of everything, you need to make sure that you've rested yourself appropriately and that you begin building up very slowly with, say, 10-minute increments 3 times a day as opposed to more than that. That might be 3 walks, but it might be a walk, it might be weight training, and it might be a stretch. Accumulate more exercise, but do that slowly and responsibly. And then the second tip to remember is intense early and light late. That right now is extremely important because you're working with your cortisol, your stress level if you're doing that. Right now is not the time to be doing intense exercise late in the day. The later it is, the lighter it should be. So going for a walk, not a brisk walk necessarily, going for a light, easy, short walk later in the evening. Thinking of it as a way to transition to your evening so that you're calmer, cooler, more relaxed. That makes sense. And those 2 pieces are something you want to reinforce more than ever. Late in the day, you can't, quote unquote, catch up with your exercise. If you missed what should have been today, a high intensity workout, you don't want to make up for it late in the day. Give yourself a grace period, a hall pass, and forfeit for the right thing today. Because if you get a better night's sleep, your immune system will be boosted and potentially you'll have more of the right hormones for reaching optimal weight and energy as well. So let me talk about really stress and your autonomic nervous system. You've got 2 pieces to that, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. And your sympathetic system is literally automatic, like it sounds, and it is your flight or fight response. It's when you immediately react to some kind of initial fear. You see someone about to fall that you love and you reach for them. You are driving in your car and you put your foot on the brake because someone's run out in front of you or a car's pulled in front of you and it's a near miss. That feeling that you've got right then, that's that fight or flight response. How do we get that calmed back down? Because today in our society, we live under these chronic stressors and we're not actually calming that back down. They're staying elevated and then going higher when we have instances like that in traffic on the way to work. So your parasympathetic nervous system is literally what you want to start nurturing. And there are 2 terms associated with it. One is called feed or breed, meaning that before you eat, and if you're really going to eat and enjoy it and digest your food, starting with creating the saliva that starts already to break down your food in your mouth before it even gets down into your gut, you're relaxed and ready to digest. So some of you may notice, this is true of you, that you don't have an appetite when you're super stressed. And others, you may notice that you actually have more of an appetite, cravings, but not for anything good. And those are both potentially related to your feed or breed. So we don't necessarily have that parasympathetic nervous system turned on. And those are cues that we don't. And the other part of that is breed. So it's almost impossible, or at least very difficult, for a woman to get pregnant, a man and a woman together to get pregnant if they're stressed, one or the other or both of them, for sure. So when this is over, there is an expected baby boom. We'll see what happens. But you've got to, in effect, put that parasympathetic nervous system to work for you. And the other piece is what you've probably heard more frequently is rest and digest. So if you're going to get good, high quality rest, you want to put that in and you want to be able to digest. That parasympathetic nervous system, if you can activate it before every meal, you have a better chance of having the digestive enzymes and the stomach acid there that'll help you break down your food much more comfortably and absorb the nutrients in it. So how can we do it? If we know that stress, any stressors, stimulate your sympathetic nervous system, then we need to kind of manually stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, but we can cause that to happen almost automatically by doing several things. So here's some ways to do it. Very easy. So number 1 on the list is deep rhythmic breathing. You can do that several ways, but one of the best ways is exercise. Think about rhythmic movements, walking, jogging, bicycling, swimming. They create rhythmic movement that also then enhances rhythmic breath patterns. But you can do it sitting still. You can inhale and exhale slowly according to a tempo, thinking 1 to 2 to inhale, hold it at the top, 1 to 2, exhale for 4 or 6. Gradually increase, inhale for a count of 4 or 6 or 8, hold it there, and then slowly exhale for 4 or 6 or 8. You can create that. If you took a few of those very deep breaths before every meal, you would potentially help yourself digest better. Other things are stimulating your vocal cords by humming, by speaking, even by singing. Nobody has to like your singing. Just singing will help. Washing your face with cold water is another way. Nobody knows exactly why that's true, but it is. Meditation. And you don't have to sit cross-legged in a room, quiet, chanting in order to stimulate your vagus nerve or to meditate. You can do a walk and pray, do yoga and express gratitude. Your meditation can look the way you need it to. Balancing your gut microbiome is the last one. So many of you have gone through the 28-day kickstart, and it's now currently inside of our cafe membership. That's all about getting in prebiotics, probiotics in the foods that you're eating and eliminating foods that disrupt your gut biome. And many of those triggers are things like gluten and wheat and dairy and soy, definitely sugar. So you want to look at what are you doing to help yourself in every possible way, stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system so that you can relax, sleep better, sleep more deeply, respond as opposed to react. And I hope that was helpful. And I know these are strange times that we're in, and the relationship between you right now and exercise may not be what you thought it would be. You potentially found me for weight loss, for focusing on belly fat, optimizing your hormones for greater energy, and now we're here in this moment. And yet, what you do for your immune boosting, keeping that your number one priority, will potentially also help you balance your hormones. You may come out of this COVID-19 moment we're in better off because you're now being encouraged to take this seriously, to take self-care seriously and not to see it as selfish. And I hope you'll keep that one single thought with you if you remember nothing else. You're worth it. And you have 3 generations watching you. You still got it, girl. And if you have questions, please leave it below the show notes at flipping50.com/exercise stress. And if this was helpful, I would so love it if you'd subscribe in iTunes and make sure that you've left a rating and a comment and share this with a friend. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.